Hey, HDA, and this is my step-by-step guide for Satisfactory's full release. You're probably going to be bombarded by content on this game now it's going to go in full release, so let me help you decide if this is the series you want to watch. My goal is simple. I want to help you actually finish the game. I aim to do that by giving you a clear objective in each episode and show you an efficient way to get that done. I'll show you what I build step by step, but I won't waste your time by building everything live while you need to watch. I am going to keep my builds neat and organized, as I always do, but I'll also show you some tips and tricks on how to make them look good without spending weeks on polishing them. Now, you will not have to build exactly what I do in order for this to be useful. It should work just fine if you follow along on a different part of the map, for example. Now, it makes this series perfect for beginning players, but also for veteran players that are just looking for some inspiration or simply want to have a guideline for their own builds. So, if all of that sounds good, like the video and let's get started. In this first episode I will show you how to efficiently complete the tutorial and fully automate the first 5 basic resources. I'll also go through a lot of basics for new players, so if you played the game before, just bear with me. When it comes to your starting location, remember you're always going to be playing on the same map regardless of what you pick, but you're just going to start in a different area. Now, the game recommends that you pick either the grass fields or the rocky desert, and I tend to agree because those are very nice starting locations, but I do think the rocky desert is probably one of the least popular locations to start, but I'm not entirely sure why, because I actually think it's the best one among the 4 options that you have. But again, if you want to start out somewhere else, that's fine. You can still use this guide as a guideline for what you're going to be building. I will assume you're not skipping the intro and that you're not using any of the advanced game settings. Especially these allow you to kind of cheat in the game, enable some things that you would otherwise not have, but that also means you're no longer getting any achievements. So I'm trying to keep this playthrough as clean as I can, but of course if you do want to use these settings, by all means go ahead. Okay, just a couple of quick things so you know what you're actually doing. Once you get into the game, make sure you press tab in order to open up the inventory and drag your equipment. In this case, this is your stabber, your Xeno sapper, which you're going to use to defend yourself. Drag it into the hand slot so you can actually equip it, and you can start stabbing monsters if you need to. If you're playing the tutorial, you'll also want to press F and make sure you dismantle the drop pod. If you skip the tutorial, this won't actually be there and you will also already have the resources on you. Now, if you want to play along with me and build your factories in the same locations as I do, you want to start heading west. You will not necessarily start in exactly this position like I have. It's a little bit randomized, but you should be in the general area. As long as you head west, you should run into the ocean pretty quick. While you're moving around, get into the habit of just pressing E as you walk. This will help you vacuum up all the leaves that are on the ground. That will provide you some power later on. By default, you can sprint while holding shift, but if you go to the menu, to the controls, and then make sure the hold to sprint thing is unlocked, you only need to press shift once and you'll just keep sprinting as long as you don't touch your shift key again. Just saves you a lot of pressing that key, especially in the early game. Oh, and as a side note, if you're a new player, these super large animals don't actually do anything, they just get in the way, so you don't need to be afraid of them. Pretty much anything else that moves will eventually try to kill you, but early on in the game they will leave you alone, so don't worry about that just yet. So what you're looking for if you want to build exactly in the same spot as I am going to build my base is this particular location. So it has this large standing rock. And it's very close to the beach over here. There's this large mountain with an open area in there. And, well, I'll just take a quick look around to see where I am approximately. So this is on the west side compared to where you started out most likely, but not all the way to the coast just yet. Just behind this particular rocks formation, there is a huge amount of gas clouds, as you can see right there. If you see that one, you went too far, just move back a little bit. You will also see these weird little plants where some mosquitoes are going to pop out. They won't actually hurt you initially, but you do want to actually take this thing out because, well, you don't want them around. On the south side of this rock formation, you'll find a couple of iron nodes. I'm in the middle of those 3 at the moment. What you want to do is press E to start mining. And remember, you only need to press E once and it will just keep mining, so you don't need to keep pressing the button. Once you have some more, you can start building the hub. You can actually also build a crafting bench, but the hub comes with a crafting bench, so there's no need to build that unless you're somewhere far off in the distance. And you can place it down pretty much wherever you want. Just keep it somewhere close to your iron locations. Will make things look nice, neat, and pretty later on, but especially early on in the games, you don't really have the means to do that. So just make sure you get going before you start worrying about making things look clean. Now, if you skip the tutorial, this thing will have already been built completely, but for now, because I didn't skip the tutorial, you'll just need to do a couple of steps. And again, that doesn't actually waste your time because you're going to be building things that you would need to build anyway. Basically, you have this dashboard over here that will help you upgrade your research and things like that. And you have a crafting bench over here where you can actually make stuff. In order to get going, we'll need to upgrade the hub to level 1. That will unlock equipment workshop, portable miner, and some more equipment slots for ourselves. And in order to do that, we're going to need iron rods. So we can select that so we are prepared to go and complete that. And then once we move to the crafting bench, we can press E. We can start by making some ingots, and once we've made a couple of ingots, we can make some iron rods or iron plates. And of course, we want to focus on those iron rods first, because we will need 10 of those. Now, in order to make these, you can click this button, or you can just press Shift. You don't need to hold it, just press once, and it will start auto-crafting this stuff. I would recommend that you make a little bit of everything, because we're going to need a lot more rods, we're going to need a lot more plates. So just make sure that you use whatever ore you just mined and turn that into something useful. You won't actually need the iron ingots themselves, so feel free to make all of that stuff into plates and rods. Once you made that stuff, double click on the rods that you already have in your inventory. That will put whatever you need into this screen over here. Then you can press this button and you can start upgrading the hub. You will see it expanding, and that is the first step completed.
Upgrade 1.
With this upgrade, you will also have unlocked your personal storage box that you can use to store whatever you don't need right now. So you can, for example, store your headshare remains on there that you just killed. I picked up some nuts around the way. I don't need all of that stuff right now. I don't want to be carrying it around, so you can store it in your personal storage. Okay, next step, we want to build an equipment workshop, because that's where we're going to be building some of the more complicated stuff. Just place it down wherever, just close by, so you have easy access to it. Going to the workshop, and you will find that you can build portable miners here. You want to build whatever many you can build right now. Well, at least as long as that's not more than a handful, because we're going to use this to automate the mining for us. Now, I recommend placing at least 2 miners on the iron node over here, but if you move slightly closer to the gas clouds over here, you will find a different type of node that looks a little bit more stony, as you can see. And this is a limestone node, and I recommend that you place at least 1 miner on that node as well. Alright, back to the iron miners. If you press E to open them, you can see that it's auto mining for you. You can just press one button and get all the resources that are in there. And of course, if you want, you can also pick them back up, but for now, we're just going to leave them where they are. We have plenty of ore now, so we're going to go once again back to the crafting bench and make some more iron plates and rods, because if we look at our next goal, we actually have to spend a little bit of that to unlock all the copper-related production. Once you have the required materials, just upgrade your hub once more. Okay, so our hub is starting to look like an actual building, and in order to unlock the next step, we are going to need some copper wire as well. Now, we're going to go to the other side of this formation in order to find our copper. And remember that if you press V and you hover over the copper ore, you can scan around and it will tell you where you can find the copper nodes. Okay, so like I said, we're now on the north side of that formation. There is going to be a couple more of those plants. Again, they shouldn't be hurting you, but just make sure to clear them out anyway, because they will get hostile for a little while. And you should be finding a couple of copper nodes over here, as you can see. You'll also come across a couple of more iron nodes, and in case you're wondering why we didn't just start out there, is because you actually don't need that much copper early game, and you do need a lot of limestone. So this is why I chose to start out closer to the limestone than the copper. That just means that we have to move a little bit now. We're also going to need to, of course, put down some more of these miners, just because we don't want to do all the mining ourselves. I would say just place down a couple of them and wait for them to mine, and then bring back the ore to your starting location. Now, make some more of these ingots and then make some wire, but instead of turning that into upgrade your facility right away, I would recommend you do something else first. Go to the back of your hub and you will find this facility over here. This is the biomass burner. You can dump all the leaves that you've been collecting in here, and this will make sure they are going to be burned in order to produce some power. And then you open the building menu again, you go to the production tab, and you're going to be building 2 smelters somewhere next to your facility. Make sure that this pole that sticks out with the like the lightning mark to it is somewhere close to the actual hub, so you have an easy time hooking them up to the power. The way you do that is by crafting some cables, then pressing the 2 button. By default, this will allow you to start building a power line, and then connect the power line over here to the power line over there. It should actually automatically snap, and this will make sure that your facility starts being powered. Now, you're initially only going to be able to hook one of the smelters up to the power grid. That's not a problem, but I would recommend that you set this to start making some iron ingots, and then just dump the iron ore stacks that you have in here. This will do the smelting for you, and it will save you a lot of time when you're making more plates and rods and things like that. Okay, so it should now be pretty straightforward to make some more plates, rods, as well as wire, and we can upgrade the hub once again. Next thing you want to do is hop back to that limestone location and grab some of the limestone that is waiting there for you, because that will allow you to start making some concrete. Use that concrete to build yourself a power pole, so you can now remove the original cable and you can connect the burner to your pole and then the pole to 2 different buildings. There we go. Now you can smelt both types of ore, both the copper and the iron, at the same time. Now we want to really automate some stuff now. We have access to the constructor, but in order to make a constructor you need some reinforced iron plates. In order to make those, you're going to need some normal iron plates, you're going to need to make some screws like this, and then once you have a little bit of both, you can start making the plates. Now, in order to make your life a little easier, so you don't have to press Q every time you want to build something, you can go to the menu, hover over whatever building you want to assign to your hotbar, and then press the corresponding button. For example, if you press 3, it will bind the smelter to your hotbar like this, and then you press 4, and ta-da, the number 4 is now assigned to the constructor. So if you want to build a smelter, I only need to press 3. If I need to build a constructor, I only need to push 4. Now, I recommend that you build at least 3 or 4 constructors, and just a nice tip, if you have built a building already that you want to build again, all you need to do is put your mouse cursor over it, press your middle mouse button, and it will copy the building that is right in front of you, which makes it really easy to place down a couple of buildings. Similarly, if you're building cables, if you select a cable, you attach it to the pole. Remember, you can only attach 4 cables to a single pole. You can drag it out and it will automatically place down a cable with a pole for you once you start moving them around. Now, this is important because that makes it really easy to build power lines. So walk up to your constructors, press E so you can select what recipe you want them to start crafting, and I would recommend making at least a constructor for iron plates and iron rods, and probably one for concrete as well. These are relatively slow recipes that you won't want to be handcrafting. Wire and cable you can probably also just make by hand if you want to. You don't need that much, but again, if you want to automate that at this point, feel free to do so. Also remember that if you have something in your inventory that you want to split in terms of the stack, for example this stack of 100 copper ingots, if you right click on a stack it will automatically split it in half, so that makes it really easy to divide your resources across different buildings. It shouldn't take too long before your power shuts off and everything grinds to a halt, and that is the moment you go back to your biomass burner, throw in some more leaves or some of the wood that you might have collected, and you will just need to keep doing that until you find a way to automate power, and that will be a little while. And yes, that is very annoying, but that's pretty much the challenge that we have at this part of the game. The constructor should help you make all the resources that you need now, so you just go ahead and upgrade your hub once again. Now at this point, even though we just unlocked things like conveyor belts, and those are extremely useful, we don't actually have much of a use for them right now. So I recommend you just go straight ahead and get the resources going for the next upgrade as well. Thanks to that upgrade, we now have access to a second biomass burner, so you might want to build another power pole to make sure you can connect that. And that also means we have more power available to power our facilities, but of course you still need to put in some wood or leaves in order to make sure it actually does something. Now we're getting close to the part where we can actually really start automating our factory, but in order to do that we are first going to need some more resources. Luckily we now have unlocked the miner, that makes that a little easier. Now even though we just unlocked the miner, I actually don't recommend using them yet at this point. The portable miners mine for you automatically as well. They do so completely for free, they don't cost any power, although you of course need to actually go pick up the iron ore and copper ore and things like that and bring it to your constructors. But other than that, the belts don't really add anything, and we want a neat looking facility, and we can only start building a very nice looking facility once we get to phase 1. So I would recommend just get these resources done quickly as possible and then move on to the next part. Once you have upgrade 6, you also unlocked biomass, and then the first thing you should do is grab all your leaves and wood from your biomass burners and start turning them into biomass. That is a little bit of work, but the biomass is much more fuel efficient than the leaves themselves. Especially the wood turns into something that is way more valuable than the wood itself, so that just means you can keep your biomass burners burning for a lot longer with the same amount of resources. Speaking of biomass burners, we also unlocked the ability to start building biomass burners themselves, so we can expand the power grid if you want. Just keep in mind you'll have to fuel every single biomass burner by hand, and that gets really annoying really quickly, because at some point if you expand too much, you will be spending more time actually gathering resources than expanding your factory. So keep that in mind. This is why I try to keep the factory small for now. This is also the stage of the game that you start out with once you skip the tutorial. So if you just joined in, this is where you're going to start out, but you'll have to build a couple of smelters and constructors and things like that by yourself then as well. That said, the next target is that we are going to be progressing towards base building and logistics. These are the two things that we need to really start making a good looking factory that is completely automated and doesn't really require us to do much by hand other than gathering leaves. As you can see, the resources you need in order to unlock all of this are all the basic resources that we are already producing, so you just need a little bit more of that. You can either decide to automate that anyway, feel free to do so, or you can just run around and grab some of that and craft it by hand. It's just as fast as setting up nice looking belts. You will notice that you need quite a bit of more resources now, so if you just build an additional smelter and maybe an additional constructor, that actually goes a pretty long way in making sure you get all those resources pretty quick. Also remember that once you send off the drone in order to collect your milestone, you're actually going to have to wait a few minutes before you can send up the next, so you do have a little bit of buffer time before you can do anything else. Okay, so once you've unlocked the base building and logistics, we have all the requirements we need in order to make a pretty awesome looking base that is going to take a lot of the work out of our hands. The key ingredient being foundations that we can now build. Now normally you can place them wherever you want, there's different heights as well, but what is really relevant for you to know in case you didn't, is that once you press the control key, you will see it snapping to something. And basically what is happening here is that if you press control and you hold it, the foundations will snap to an invisible world grid. That means that if you press control once you build your first foundation, and then you make sure every other foundation is aligned to that one, and then you start building a factory on the other side of the map, also aligned to the world grid, if at any point in the game those factories end up connecting to each other, they will be perfectly aligned, which, if you're looking to make your factory look very neat and organized, is super important, especially if you, of course, build factories close to each other, and at some point you want to make sure they get connected. Also remember that you don't have to build foundations one by one like this. No, you can press R to go to the build mode zoop, and if you do that, then you can just drag and drop and build a lot of foundations in a single go like this. Also remember that now you have access to the ramps in the game. You can start exploring wherever you want, so you can literally reach any part of the game, because, well, you can just drag up a ramp to a rock formation like this, or run up, and congrats, you can now scale any mountain in the game wherever you want to go, as long as you have the resource to get up here. Which is a side note, that is exactly what I'm going to do, because, well, we could build the base on the ground floor, and honestly, there's nothing wrong with that, and in fact, it's probably the most practical, but just to show you that you can start being creative from the get-go, why not just build it up on this rock formation over here? It's nice and clean, we have a nice view, and, well, there's plenty of space in the air, and the upside of building something slightly higher is that you don't run into trouble once you start expanding this base if you want to, because, well, there's nothing to get in the way once you're up here in the air. I do recommend, however, in order to make this look nice, that you don't have floating things flying around, but that you do build downwards as well, so it looks like your building is actually being supported by something, even though the game doesn't require you to do that. Now, as you will quickly notice once you start building large platforms of foundations in order to place your factory on, that's going to cost you tons and tons of concrete. So that's actually the first thing I would recommend that you completely automate. Now, in order to do that, you can actually go to the crafting menu. I would recommend that you queue up 3 constructors and 2 miners. And that will all put that in a to-do list if you click your right mouse button on that. So it's an easy reminder to see on the right hand side of your screen, do I have enough resource to actually build those things? Now I recommend building those 3 constructors fairly close to where the limestone is. So in my case, that is on the south side of my pillar over here. And also remember that once you place down a constructor and you hold control, once again, it aligns to the grid, but it also shows you nice lines how these buildings are aligned to each other. So you can make sure that even if you place it further away, that it's still perfectly aligned with the buildings you already have, or you can just press them up close and do it that way. Keep in mind that it also shows you where the in and outputs are. So this is the output and this is the input, and you want all of those on the same side of the building, of course. When it comes to miners, remember that you can actually build miners on foundations as well. Just don't build the foundation up too high, because then the miner won't be able to connect to the actual deposit anymore. But this allows you to make sure you can neatly align them with the rest of your factory. If you're playing on the same location as I am, then the first limestone deposit, you should know where that is. And the second one is a little bit closer to the ocean over there, so there's actually 2 very close by. Also, the tutorial already explained this, but just in case, you actually need to cut away this big stone that is on every single deposit the first time you get around it, because otherwise you won't be able to place the miner on top of it. It actually takes a little bit of hacking away before it disconnects, but there you go. Now we can just place the miner on the deposit. One new addition with this release is that before you could just build these nice swirly looking belts if you wanted to, but you actually need to do a lot of work to make them nice and straight. Now you can just press R, go to the build mode straight, and look, nice right angled belts wherever you point them to. So no longer you have to worry about placing them in nice little angles, you can just do that automatically. Another side note is that if you're going to be building in a vertical manner like I am now, I would recommend building your lifts from the top floor. That actually just makes it a little bit easier than doing it from the ground. The reason being is that if you align your foundations to the world grid, as you should, you can just put them on the edge like this, and you can drag them up, and you have a very easy way of telling where your lift should end, and you can just click and look, now you have a nice little lift that goes right onto the platform. Okay, how the hell did you get up here? Well, that's a nice opportunity for me to show you how to chase off the animals if you don't want them near your base. Just hit them once, and they will kind of panic and run off. If you hit them a lot, they will eventually die, but you can kind of just shepherd them into a direction you want them to go. In order to make all of this work, you're going to need, well, like I said, 2 miners. These are 2 miners put on normal nodes. So there's also impure nodes and pure nodes, which will either produce half the production of a normal node or twice the production of a normal node. Now, right now, if you look at these normal nodes and we select one of these miners, you can see it's producing 60 limestone per minute, which is actually the maximum amount that you can put on a single Mark 1 belt. So a normal node is actually perfect when it comes to optimizing our belt speed right now. If you have a pure node, it can produce more, but it can't actually put all of that stuff on a belt for now. In order to actually utilize all the stuff we have on the belts now, we are going to need splitters and mergers. Now, for example, if we go to this constructor over here, we check the recipe, it's going to require 45 limestone per minute, but we have 60 on the belt. So we actually have a little bit more on the belt than we need for a single constructor. Now, that means that we have a splitter over here, which we have going into the belt, splitting off half of the resources on this belt and half on the other one. Now, as soon as one belt is full, it will just put the remaining resources on the belt that is not full yet, so this will balance itself out. But this thing is not a splitter, but it's a merger, so this is actually taking in this belt and recombining anything else that you can put in here from the other 3 sides into a single output belt that goes into this constructor. Now, why do I have that? Because I have a splitter on the other side as well. So this is again splitting off the second belt into 2 halves. And then those 2 remains are going to be combined and go into this last constructor over here. So that way we actually utilize all the resources we have on the belt. Now this will require us to actually have 135 limestone per minute, the 3 constructors combined, so 3 times 45. We actually only have 120, so this middle constructor is actually not going to be working at full speed, or actually neither of them is going to work at full speed because of the balancing that's happening between these mergers and splitters. But that's not a problem. We just want to make sure we're not wasting any resources. Make sure that when you're placing splitters and mergers, you take note of the lines that appear, because that will actually tell you if they're aligned with all the other buildings that are close by. So for example, right now I already have a merger over here. So of course I want these to be nicely aligned, so I can have a nice straight belt. So that means I'm looking for these two lines, one pointing to the other merger and one pointing to the constructor where I'm going to collect the output from. That way I can make sure that once I start placing my belts like this, and like this, and like this, that everything is nice and straight. Specifically, oh, actually I needed to turn this one around, but what I'm trying to do here is making sure I have a nice storage unit where I can put all of that output into. So you can see we have the concrete on this belt now, which is going to go into the storage unit, and that's going to collect all the resources for me, so I have easy access to a huge amount of resources really quickly. Now, just a final note, just because we needed to do complicated stuff with belts on the other side doesn't always mean you need to do that on the other side as well. So, for example, if we look at the output, it's 15 per minute. We can put 60 on a belt. So 3 times 15, even if they would be working at full speed, is only 45. So all the output can be put on a single belt and go into this storage container over here. Of course, we also are going to need more power than we have just from the biomass burners at our hub. So you can build some biomass burners yourself. And keep an eye on how much the capacity versus the maximum consumption is. The maximum consumption will tell you if every single machine in your grid is working, how much power that would need. And the capacity is the maximum amount of power you can actually currently produce. If the consumption goes above your capacity, everything will short circuit and shut down, and that is not what you want to happen. Okay, so next on the list is placing down a miner on an iron node, and then make sure that it's connected to 2 smelters, because each smelter can take in 30 iron ore, so that's a full belt completely utilized. And then connecting those 2 smelters together, first of all with a merger and then back with a splitter, in order to combine into 2 constructors, each one making iron plates. Now technically what you could do is just hook up 1 smelter directly to a constructor as well. Actually, that's not a bad plan if that's what the type of layout that you like, but we are going to be scaling up this production facility later on, so I recommend you leave yourself some space. Makes it easier to redesign this once we are going to do that, but for now we just want to make sure we get a steady flow of iron plates incoming. So once again, make sure you set up a storage unit so you can just go and pick those up easily. Similarly, find yourself another iron node, connect it up with a miner, and then connect 2 smelters to that. And then to those 2 smelters, you could actually connect 4 constructors making iron rods. Now, honestly, 4 constructors making iron rods, as you will probably have noticed, is way too much for right now. So you could actually just connect at least 3 of them probably, and still have plenty of iron rods to work with. But considering the ratios, how they work out, you might as well just place down 4. Even if you don't connect them, just to get a feel for how much space that actually takes up. Now, where you put them, how you place them, that is completely up to you. Like I said, you don't necessarily need to follow along with my build, and you're probably going to redesign this specific base a couple of times as you unlock new upgrades, better belts, better miners and things like that. So don't worry about exactly where you place things. I do recommend that you leave yourself some space, because if you build everything very close together, kind of like I did actually now, that makes it really hard, or at least harder, to kind of relocate things later on. So as a general rule, just give yourself a lot of space to build with, because you're going to need all of that space and probably a lot more on top of that. Last but not least, you find yourself a copper node, ideally a normal one, so you can hook up a miner, 2 of these smelters making the iron ingots, and then we're going to do something slightly different. So again, I have 4 of these constructors making wire. That's actually 15 in and 30 out, so that's actually going to produce 120 wire. Again, more than we need, so you can disable a couple of those if you want. Especially considering, as you can see, my factory just came to a standstill because I ran out of power. But if you do want to utilize all of that, then you can hook up 2 of these constructors to a single belt, have 1 belt going into a storage unit, which I actually put a bit closer to my base so I don't have to run up and down that much, and then the second one can feed into this constructor over here that is going to turn 60 wire per minute, so that's an entire belt full of wire into cables. So that means that we are now not just producing wire, but also cables all from simple copper. Now, like I said, I have a couple of belts running here, all the way to where the rest of my facility is. Again, depends a little bit, of course, on where you're building your factory, but you do want to keep some stuff a little bit close together, especially things that you might regularly need. And this way I have this central hub over here where I'm making the rods, I'm making the plates, the wire and the cable. And then now if I just place down a crafting bench in the middle of this, I can also easily make screws, reinforced plates, and that means we have easy access to everything. Which means that you can remove the starting base that we initially started out with at that random location where I already said, don't worry about it, we're going to replace this. And you can then bring your hub back up to wherever it is you're building your factory, so you have pretty much everything close by and completely automated, which makes it really easy to start delivering, for example, the field research technologies and everything in tier 2 as well. Now, of course, there's a couple of things in there that were not completely automated yet. So, for example, reinforced iron plates, we definitely want that automated as well, which is something we're going to work towards in the next episode. We're also actually going to scale up all of this production quite a bit in the next episode as well, but by this time you're probably playing for something between 2 and 4 hours, depending on how experienced you are, maybe even a little longer. And honestly, I think that's a pretty nice moment to stop, think about what you're going to do next, and then continue on the next day after. You actually get a warning, I believe, as well if you play for more than 4 hours. So the game's kind of telling you, well, maybe it's time to take a break. So that is exactly what I'm going to do now as well. I hope you found this useful. I realized this was very much a starter episode, but again, I think that there's probably going to be a lot of new people coming to this game. And I just wanted to show everyone that you don't need to overcomplicate things from the get-go, but you should actually save that until later. So, I hope you found this useful. If you did, make sure to like and subscribe, and I hope to catch you in the next one.